Welcome to Real World Peaceful Parenting, a podcast for parents that are tired of yelling, threatening, and punishing their kids. Join mom and master certified parent coach Lisa Smith as she gives you actionable, step-by-step strategies that'll help you transform your household from chaos to cooperation. Let's dive in.
Welcome to today's episode. Today I'm bringing you part 2 of Stop Punishing and Start Guiding. Did you love last week's episode? Oh, I got amazing feedback from you all about the episode. And as you know, in part 1, we laid the groundwork. We talked about guiding our kids into learning rather than punishing into obedience. I love this topic. I love it. We talked about how children need support and safety to grow. They need room to make mistakes, sometimes over and over again. And they need to be coached into learning the lesson, not scared or punished into obedience. And today I want to give you specific examples of what that might look like. I could give you tons and tons and tons of examples on how to set limits rather than punish, but I want you to hear this. It's not that I'm going to tell you the exact way to set the limit for your family. Rather, setting limits is a philosophy and an approach. It's a way of thinking about your kids' mistakes, and it's a way of guiding and teaching the lesson rather than scaring into obedience. It's an approach and a commitment. And let me say, of course, our kids need rules and limits. This is never about becoming a permissive parent because rules and limits help your kids feel loved and know what is expected of them. It allows them to be successful. What I want you to hear is the need to acknowledge your kids' perspective. When kids feel seen, heard, and valued, they're more able and more likely to accept the limits that we're setting. And setting limits is the process of supporting and teaching your kids while being clear with the request and letting your child know the limits. Let me say that again. It's the process of supporting and teaching your kid while being clear with the request and letting your kid know the limits. If possible, I want you to think about tools like giving a choice or redirecting. It's about what the child can do to meet their needs and solve the problem. And limits are based in a basic understanding of developmentally appropriate expectations of your child, their temperament, and your family values. Said another way, when we set a limit, we want to take into account appropriate expectations of their age, their temperament, and your family values. When my clients set limits, I encourage them to think about tools like giving choices, right? That might look like, hey, there's no throwing the ball in the house. You can take the ball outside or you can throw a stuffed animal in the house, right? Choices. The choice might be you can brush your teeth now or you can brush your teeth in 5 minutes. Giving them a choice while knowing that tonight is a night that we need to brush the teeth and we need to get it done. But I can give you a choice as to when you do it. And as your kids get older, you can move into the if-then choices, as I call them. If you choose to do this, then this will happen. Or if you choose to do this, then this won't happen, right? And choose is the important word there. You say to your child, if you choose to do this, you're putting the choice in their hands. You're letting them know up front, and you've set the limit, right? So examples might be, you can't have your phone in your room while you're sleeping. You can charge your phone in the kitchen or in my bedroom. You get to choose. Another example might be, let's say you've talked about an app like maybe Snapchat or Instagram, and you've told your child you don't think that they're ready to have the app. You're not ready for them to have it yet. Or maybe you're not ready for them to have a subscription on TikTok, let's say, right? So then you set a limit by telling them, hey, if you choose to download that app that we talked about not using, then you will have to take a break from your phone for a week. All the choices are in their hands. If they choose to download that app, if they choose to disregard what you've said, if they choose to download that app, then they will have to take a break from their phone for a week. You're letting them know up front and they get to choose. Another example might be if you choose to come home after curfew, then you won't be able to go out next weekend, right? You're setting limits by giving them a choice. You're also setting the limit up front when you're calm and regulated, and you're communicating it to them at a time when they're calm and regulated. Another tool you might use with setting limits is to redirect. And this works especially well when you have little kids, right? So you might say, hey, remember, we don't bite in this family. I understand that you're very, very, very mad at your brother, but use your words instead of biting, right? You're redirecting them away from the action. Another example might be, it looks like you wanted your sister to move, so you pushed her. No pushing, that hurts. Instead, use your words and tell her to move, please. That's redirecting. Another example might be, I can see that you're full of energy right now. Let's go outside and play, right? You're just redirecting your little one by setting limits. You're redirecting them to do something else that works for them and works for you at the same time. And the third mistake I really like to work with is repairing after a big mistake. Repair and recovery. And, let's say something's happened and you might ask your child afterwards, hey, how can we make this right? How can we make restitution for the mistake? And you take time to sit down, think about it, and discuss it together. Let's say one of your kids has hit the other kid or broke one of their toys. You might sit down together and say, hey, the toy is broken and we can't fix it, but we can make it right. What can we do? And maybe your little one decides to either sincerely go apologize or draw a picture or write a note saying how sorry they are that they did that, right? That's a great way to make a repair. Let's say your child has gotten in trouble at school. Maybe you have a 10-year-old that's gotten in trouble at school and you decide to sit down and repair after a big mistake and you have a conversation about it. You say, hey, how can we fix this? And the two of you decide that your child is going to go into the classroom and apologize to the teacher, or maybe write a note to the other child that he or she hurt, or maybe write a note to the teacher letting them know they understand their mistake and they're not going to do it again, right? You can focus on repair and restitution of the mistake. And oftentimes this makes a very strong impression on your child and helps them feel like they've asked for forgiveness and brought the situation full circle. And then they can move on from there and move forward. So the tools of choices, redirect, and repair are used with the intention of finding win-win solutions for both parties involved. And setting limits gives a voice to your child and his feelings and needs. And as we talked about last week, and I want you to remember, setting limits is upfront. It's not waiting until the mistake has happened. It's setting the limits upfront. The limits are based on your values. You're often giving your child choices, and it's the beginning of the conversation, not the end. Oftentimes in my family, when we've set a limit with our son, after a while, he'll come back and want to have a conversation about it. Hey, that's not working for me. I'd like to try this instead. Or what do you think about this? Or could we change it to that? And it's really taught all of us how to have conversations around setting limits. And it also helps us once we agree to the limit, because everybody's had a say, it's much easier to follow the limit and understand the consequences of not following the limit. The benefit of setting limits is that you're setting them when you're in your higher brain, when you're regulated, and you're communicating it to your child when he or she or they are regulated. Another advantage is it turns on the internal compass, which is ultimately what we're going for here, right? Ultimately, we want our kids to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because they fear getting caught. And setting limits allows the strong-willed child to feel in control. Lastly, let me say setting limits also releases you from the expectation that we don't always have to have the right answer when things go wrong. It allows you to circle back around to the conversation. Even if you set a limit that you realize is sort of too strenuous or isn't reasonable or you went too far, you can always circle back around to the conversation and set the limit because it's the beginning of the conversation, not the end. And setting the limit from a calm place, from a regulated state, has honestly been the biggest game changer for me in my parenting, bar none. It has been the tool that has allowed me to make the most progress down the path of peaceful parenting, setting the limit from a place of calm while I'm regulated. It is my most useful, productive, helpful tool that I've ever brought into my parenting, ever. And I want this for you too. So let me illustrate this for you with an example from a family that I work with who recently set a limit on a really important day. And what happened is the mom started out punishing the child, but caught herself, regrouped, and instead of punishing, set a limit. And I think you may be able to really relate to this example, so I want to share it with you. This is an email exchange that a client and I had recently. And my client Sue wrote to me and said, Lisa, my 8-year-old son is strong-willed, has ADHD, and is an only child. And there's a weird dynamic we see when we go on vacation with my large extended family. She wrote, he becomes obstinate and disrespectful to my husband and I. And she explained to me that evening he was going to be in her sister's wedding. And the night before, at the wedding rehearsal, he was talking while adults were talking, interrupting, laughing, yelling, hitting the teenager next to him who happened to be his cousin and not doing what he was told. Sue said, I marched up to him to pull him aside and give him a talking to. And he shouted, no, pulled his arm away and ran away from me. Sue said, my son will not listen to me when he's around his cousins. And I feel it's because he's hanging around with everyone in the beach house, playing miniature golf and feeling very free. She asked me, Lisa, how do I get him to behave? Sue said, my husband and I are at each other's throats when our son behaves this way, and I feel like a failure as a parent. Please give me some encouragement and guidance, Lisa, please. So I wrote back to her and I said, Sue, why do you feel like a failure as a parent? Sounds like your son is exploring and getting a bit carried away with his cousins. Can you work past the failure and just see this as a growing experience for all of you? Feeling like a failure is you getting into the storm with him, you getting triggered rather than staying on the sidelines and being his emotional coach. Sounds like he doesn't know how to handle these situations and trying to punish him into behaving isn't getting you anywhere. Can you talk with him ahead of time about age-appropriate behavior? Can you explain that this is a special day for your sister and family? Let him know that you want him to have fun and be respectful at the same time. Now, here's where I encourage her to set the limit. Then let him know that if he chooses to hit or do X, then Y will happen. Let him know up front so he can choose which path he wants to take. So it might be something like, if you choose to hit and get really rough with people on this special day, then we'll take a walk away from the group until you can gain control of yourself, and then we'll rejoin the group. This is not a punishment. This is just setting a limit. I encourage Sue to let him know up front what will happen. Invite him to regulate himself. Be specific so he knows what to work on, and then if he can't regulate himself, you step in and help him. As the parent, it works best if you stay calm and empathetic. Empathy might look like understanding that he loves being around his cousins and he finds it really hard to regulate himself when he's around them. Sue wrote back and said, thank you. I hope he will walk away with me if need be. I'm nervous about it. So I wrote back to her and I told her, if you tell him the plan ahead of time, he should. Review it over and over and over with him in the car now. Also understand and have empathy that he might be nervous, scared, excited, anxious, or all of the above about being the center of attention in the wedding at 8 years old. Imagine how agitating all of this could feel if you don't know how to process it, and then it comes out in unacceptable ways, especially for an 8-year-old boy. Sue responded, "My husband and I just went over it with him in the car, and he said many, many, many times, Lisa, that he was very nervous. I can see that now and have empathy for him." She said, "I was so busy being mad at him for not behaving that I couldn't see what was going on for him. I wrote, acknowledge that and give him lots of empathy. Tell him you understand what he's going through and it will be okay. Tell him it's okay to be nervous and ask him how you can help him. Let him know if it feels like too much, he can come over and stand by you and hold on to your leg." Sue wrote, "My husband agreed wholeheartedly with what you said. Thank you. This is stabilizing us." And then I wrote back to her and I said, "My last tip is to release the expectation that this must go perfectly. Your son doesn't have to perform or get it right." And I said, "This will change your energy and help him relax on a subconscious level." She had sent me a picture, so I said, "You guys look great. Enjoy yourselves." Sue finalized the email exchange by saying, "Wonderful, wonderful advice and encouragement. We're talking now about his nervousness. And you're right, I need to let go of my expectations." So the next day, Sue followed up with a quick message to me. And she said, "Lisa, with your help, my son sailed through participating in the wedding with no issues. I was able to focus on my sister and not worrying about what he was doing. I just kept telling myself, he's perfect as he is and let him be." Then she said, "LOL, I'm using your advice to work on being less reactive with my husband as well." Lisa, you're a godsend at this time, and we so appreciate you. Oh, thanks, Sue. So this is a cool example, yes? I really love this example because I love how, Sue got triggered. She got angry that her son wasn't behaving. Now, let's remember, he's 8 years old, and he's in a wedding for the first time, and he's away on vacation out of his routine, and he's around his cousins, and then he's in a wedding. So he's nervous, and he's probably feels all the expectation, and he gets nervous that he's going to remember what he's supposed to do. And so he starts to storm, right, by hitting his cousin and laughing too much and talking over people. And when she tried to punish him into being obedient, he stormed even more. And then when she started talking to him about his feelings and needs, he was able to regulate himself. "Yes, Mom, I'm nervous. I'm nervous." And then she was able to set a limit. Not from one of those places of, "If you don't behave, I'm going to come over there right now and grab you," right? Because how is that going to elicit cooperation? So instead she said, "Hey, this is a special day. And if things feel like they're getting to be a little too much, I'm going to come over and you and I are just going to take a quick little walk to gain control over ourselves. And then as soon as we've got control, we'll rejoin the party." It's not like, "Hey, if you can't behave, we're going back to our hotel room or we're going to leave the wedding," right? Because that's not going to regulate this little boy. That's just going to amp it up even more. She's just calmly setting the limit by letting him know up front, "Hey, if things get a little out of hand or I see you hitting your cousins or struggling, we're just going to take a little walk until you gain control of yourself. And no big deal. As soon as you gain control of yourself, we'll just rejoin the party. I want you to have fun and be respectful because we're at a wedding with a whole bunch of adults," right? So she could say to him, "If you choose to hit and get really rough with people, then we'll take a walk away from the group. And as soon as you gain control of yourself, we'll rejoin the group." That is setting a limit from a place of empathy and understanding. That is helping everybody get their needs met. I need you to be respectful and not be wild. And if it gets that way for you, the action plan is, if then we're just going to walk away. And as soon as we gain control, we'll rejoin the group. Because I can understand, honey, that you're very, very, very nervous, right? And then it's releasing the expectation that he get it right or be perfect. Because if he doesn't, You have a game plan. Oh, setting limits is so useful. And I hope you found this example really helpful. Okay, let's recap. Setting limits are not demands, as you saw in that example. They're not demands coming from an expectation of complete obedience. Rather, a process of teaching and supporting. And setting limits gives a voice to your child and his or her feelings and needs. And setting limits are upfront, values-based, you give choices, and it's the beginning of a conversation, not the end. And in the example with Sue, by practicing it and talking about it ahead of time, she was able to really draw out and understand how nervous her 8-year-old son really was, and then support him with understanding and empathy through that. Which is why it's important to understand that setting limits are the beginning of the conversation. It's the beginning of everybody working to understand their feelings and needs and setting the limit so that behaviors that come from our values can be followed, right? When your child does something wrong, makes a mistake, or storms, what is the goal? Well, number one, it's to help them not do it again, right? If they spilled milk or missed curfew or downloaded that app or got up in the middle of the night to get on their iPad or hit their brother or broke their sister's toy or threw a ball in the house, the goal is to, number one, help them not do it again. Number two, it's to teach them right from wrong while guiding them around your values. And here's the truth. We can't make another human being do what we want them to do. We can only help them want to. Loving guidance and empathetic limits help your child want to follow your guidance. So good habits become a part of who he or she or they are, whether you're there or not. Rather than scaring or punishing into obedience and teaching them to avoid getting caught. If we look back to the example I shared with you about Sue and her 8-year-old son, punishing versus setting limits, right? The punishing was going over and grabbing him by the arm and yanking him away to have a good talking with him, right? That was scaring or punishing him into obedience. So then the game might become hitting the cousin when the parent isn't looking or when the parent is in the other room, which, let's be honest, might annoy the cousin over time and create more conflict in the family. But more importantly, it's scaring or punishing the 8-year-old into obedience, and oftentimes it then becomes a game of not getting caught. When she set the limit and took the time to understand that he was nervous, and took the time to understand that he was storming from a place of nervousness, and really understood that and really worked to them, and then set the limit of, hey, it's not a problem. But if you get a little rough and things feel like they're getting out of hand, we're just going to take a little walk until you regulate yourself and come back. That helps the child want to follow the guidance. Oh, so good, right? Oh, I just love it. I love it. I love it. And I want it for you. I want it for you and I want it for your kids. It's important. It creates connection that leads to cooperation. And I'm going to share this quote again because I think Alfie Cohen says it so well. If your kids feel safe, they can take risk, ask questions, make mistakes, learn to trust, share their feelings, and grow. Oh, thank you, Alfie, for that insight. So good. And I want this. I want this for you, and I want this for your kids. And I want to just say, you can do this. You've got this. It takes commitment and practice. It takes understanding progress, not perfection. And then it just takes setting your intention to dig in. Oh, all right. I hope you found this super helpful. And I'd love to hear some feedback on how it's going for you. So jump over to our Instagram page at _peaceful_parent and share your success stories with me. Send me a DM. I'm dying to hear from you. All right. Until we meet again, I'm wishing you peaceful parenting. Thank you so much for listening today. I want to personally invite you to head over to thepeacefulparent.com/welcome and sign up for my free Peaceful Parenting mini course. You'll find everything you need to get started on the path to peaceful parenting just waiting for you over there at www.thepeacefulparent.com/welcome. Can't wait for you to get started.
Thanks for listening to Real World Peaceful Parenting. If you want more info on how you can transform your parenting, visit thepeacefulparent.com. See you soon.